I spent my whole life thinking that my constant food cravings, the searching, which is what I call when you finish a meal, you're super stuffed and then you still want more food 5 minutes later. I thought that was a personal defect. I thought it was a lack of discipline, a lack of willpower. Turns out it wasn't. If you watched my video about eating 130 grams of protein for 30 days, I put up that video a few weeks ago. You already know part of this story, but today I want to go a little bit further than that video did, because the question is, if it's not about willpower then, or I'm not lacking discipline, then what do I actually do when the cravings hit or when that food noise hits? You're listening to the Set Point Science Podcast, the show where we quiet food noise, build real satiety, and help women in midlife create weight loss that's actually built to last, even when life doesn't slow down to make room for it. I'm your host, Sherry Alberts, and on today's episode, I'm breaking down why cravings and food noise is not a willpower problem, and the 4 shifts that I actually use to quiet it down without gritting my teeth. Here's the thing about willpower. It treats food noise like it's some kind of a moral test. Are you good? Are you bad? Like if you were just a little bit stronger, a little bit more committed, you'd be able to sit in the same room as that chocolate and not think about it. Like, thin people must do that. It must be easy for them. Why does it have to be so hard for me? Kind of stuff. And when our strength to resist that kind of stuff fails, and it always eventually fails, doesn't it? The conclusion that most of us reach, or the conclusion that is handed to us by incorrect outsiders, is that there must be something wrong with me. But here's what I actually think is going on underneath it. Food noise isn't one problem. It's actually 2, stacked right on top of each other. Not enough protein and too many rules. Take the protein side first. Your brain isn't being dramatic when it won't let go of an appetite signal. It actually has a real physical job to do, keeping your organs and your muscles fed. And if the supply doesn't cover that job, the appetite switch just stays on. It's going to reach for whatever fuel is fastest, which is almost always, if you notice, sugar, carbs, fat. So that craving that feels like a willpower failure is a lot of the time actually just your body running on an actual shortage. It's not your character showing through. But now stack restriction on top of all that. Years of telling yourself that certain foods are off limits. It doesn't fade quietly into the background. It builds over the years. That's how the brain learns. So every time we're like, I can't have that, it piles on to the last time you said that until your brain actually starts pushing back hard. And then you call it self-sabotage instead of what it actually is, a backlog of restriction that's finally demanding your attention. And the longer it sits there, the louder it gets. So you put these 2 things together and overeating stops looking like laziness, doesn't it? It's just a body running low on actual fuel plus years of saying no finally catching up with us, both landing on the same plate at the same time. So it's why also gritting your teeth harder was never going to fix it. You can't out-discipline a fuel shortage, and you can't out-discipline a backlog either. Both have to get addressed at some point at the same time, or neither of them are going to move. So inside what I teach in Set Point Restore, which is my coaching membership, there are 4 foundational shifts to undo this mess. It's not 14 new habits, this big fat rule book, an app to use, journaling, accountability, and then 1,000 other things. It's just 4 things. Now, the first is called reality planning. So inside of Set Point Restore, when you join, we start exactly with where your life is right now. Not the calm, organized, perfect version of your life that you wish you had or that you think you should have. You learn how to stop overeating inside of your current messy reality. We're not going to wait for less stress, when you have more time, when it's a better week or things like that, so that we can show up. Because that week isn't coming and you don't need it to. Here's what that actually looked like for me recently. So I got a cough from my daughters. Then it turned into a post-infectious cough. And then my favorite, hyperreactive airways. That means that I was coughing for 5 to 6 weeks every time I laughed or talked. And at some point I just couldn't take it anymore. I tried everything. I tried herbal stuff. I tried tea. I tried so many different things. And my life was so interrupted that what I needed was medical help. So the last option was a steroid. The steroid that I was prescribed to take to calm my airways is called prednisone, and it's widely known for cranking up appetite and food noise. And trust me when I say I'm not just being dramatic, it is a documented side effect of this particular medication. And my doctor and I talked about it, and it seemed that it was the lesser of the evils that I was dealing with at that moment. Now, on a medication like this, which ratchets up food noise, the old version of me would have spiraled. When you have food noise loud all day, every day, you don't do so well. And I'm going to say it was bad, and I did have a noticeably tough time. But this time, because I'd already built a lot of new habits and rhythms, this protein first rhythm that I did so much better than I would have years ago. The cravings mostly only hit me at night instead of all day long. And yeah, I still gained some weight from the medication and the cravings. I'm not going to say I didn't. But that's exactly the point of my reality planning step. You don't get to expect perfection when life throws you a curveball, like a medication that's working against you. But what you can expect is that a rhythm that you've already built holds up better than starting from zero. And it just keeps getting better as time goes on and the more you practice this, no matter what roadblock pops up next. And the update, since I'm recording this after the fact, the weight is already coming back down that I gained on prednisone. My blood pressure numbers are improving again, and the food noise itself has settled back down to roughly where it was before my flare-up even started. And it didn't take some dramatic reset or some, fast or something like that. It's just going back to the rhythm that was already there before this happened. Well, that and accepting that I had to go through another speed bump of a real life. Now, the second part of my method is what I call food neutralization. This is where we systematically drain that emotional and moral charge out of food. We're not going like, oh, anything goes, I can eat anything I want, nothing matters. That's not what this is. Nutrition is still important, but it's psychological here. It's removing the I shouldn't have this, or I have to eat this way so I can live longer, or I need this or I need that. That kind of noise in your head that turns food into something that always feels really super loaded. Because when a food becomes genuinely neutral in your head and your heart, it loses that magnetic pull that, calls you out of bed or out of your chair towards the kitchen. And once that charge is gone from all the foods, you actually get to choose the healthier option from a place of I want to instead of I have to. And that can be life-changing for many of us. I'll give you a real example of this. So when I was pregnant with my first daughter, severe nausea wiped out almost everything that I could stand to eat. And Twix bars, interestingly, were one of the only things that didn't make it worse. If you've ever been through first trimester food aversions, you already know this is incredibly common, and it's not some personal failure. It's just what a lot of pregnant bodies do. Going back to eating traditional candy at all after years of treating it as completely off limits was super weird and hard for me. And yeah, some of us might be thinking, oh, she's just weak and she really just wanted to eat junk. That wasn't it. I really struggled with the guilt of it, the food aversions I was going through, the nausea. And because the idea of candy had been so loaded for me for so long before that. And now, years later, my husband actually brings Twix home for me, and I've gotten to the point where I generally don't care if they're sitting in the drawer. I share them with my daughters. My husband's starting to get the picture. It's just not that interesting to me anymore. Now, the third thing that we work on in Restore is hunger and fullness retraining. So this is where protein comes back in because the body's internal off switch for appetite is so much easier to hear when a meal actually contains enough protein to create real satiety. And when that psychological reactance from restricting so much has already been turned down. You can't fully hear your fullness signal if half of your brain is still in rebellion mode. And just a quick side note, it might not be protein that you're needing, it might be carbs or fat, depending on how you've eaten in the past. We look at all this strategically for each individual inside my program. There is no one size fits all. So relearning to understand and respond to our body's natural hunger and fullness cues, that is what is so important here. And a quick side note here, some of you might be thinking that, my body's so messed up that I'm not going to be able to get back to it. Or many of us have heard this line, your metabolism is broken, as if you can't go back. But listen, bodies are resilient. These things can shift. And I'm talking for you too. You who's listening, yes, they can shift for you. Learning to allow these things to rewire themselves the way they were when we were first born, understanding how much to eat and when to stop, it's available to us. So relearning to understand and respond to our body's natural hunger and fullness cues, I watched this happen with a private client of mine. She told me she had never actually realized that there were different levels of fullness, or that she could learn to recognize where to stop before she hit that stuffed feeling. And the biggest thing for her was that she couldn't believe that no one had ever even taught this to her before. Just learning to tell the difference between her hunger and satiety levels changed so much for her. She's been able to lose weight steadily, not because she started eating out of willpower, but because she could finally feel where enough actually was and respond to it. The fourth and final step of my program is what I call gentle nighttime hunger. It's the only piece that intentionally creates a caloric deficit because, hey, we need a caloric deficit in order to lose weight, and it needs to be sustained long enough to the point where we can actually lose the weight we need to. But in my program, caloric deficit is done on purpose, safely, and after these first steps are familiar. And we do all this without deprivation. So we learn to experience a manageable, comfortable kind of empty at the right time of day because we were properly nourished earlier in the day. That is a completely different experience than the kind of hunger that comes from under-eating all day, white-knuckling until dinner, or the nighttime eating that always seems to derail us. There's actually a spectrum of hunger that you can sit in at night, and most points along that spectrum are an indication that weight loss is happening. What I teach is how to find what I call gentle hunger. That's the kind that's barely noticeable. We work on specific ways to tell the difference between that gentle, manageable hunger and the one that keeps you up at night and wrecks your sleep. This difference is subtle, but it matters because one of those things is going to help you reach your goals and the other is going to be working against you. So the first things that we do in the program, those first 3 shifts, are actually what bring you to a place that I call enough land. It's a calm mental space where food just isn't loud anymore. Food thoughts and food noise and stuff hasn't disappeared completely. It's just quieted way down. And gentle nighttime hunger, the 4th step, works differently. Once you're regularly living in this enough land, calm, peaceful, that's when you get to step into what I call less land. Choosing a little bit less to eat on purpose, at will, in a comfortable way, because the foundation under you is already solid enough to support it when you need to use it. I want to describe this honestly because I don't want to oversell it, but I also don't want to undersell it either. First of all, going from being someone whose food noise was blaring constantly to someone who mostly just has a mild, easy to ignore version of wanting something, that shift itself was life-changing. It was a relief that I don't think I'd ever felt reliably before, a kind of peace and calm that I didn't even think was available to me. I never even imagined it was something that I should strive to create. And it becoming commonplace was something I just thought wasn't in the cards for me. That's just for certain types of people. No, you don't understand. I am a really strong food addict. I'm never going to be able to get over this like they will. I was wrong. Because day to day, now that I'm actually living inside that, I'm surprised all the time that it's happening. But the experience itself doesn't feel super dramatic. It just feels like the absence of something that used to be constant. So these days, if I want something small, like say the other day I just had a little pack of chocolate Teddy Grahams after a meal, I can eat that, enjoy it, and move on with my day without triggering a search for whatever else I can have. So I call this kind of a thing downstairs hunger because I live in a 2-story house. So it's that feeling of, yeah, I want something, but it's all the way down there and I can't be bothered to go get it. You might still have a little extra interest in food, but it's not strong enough to act on. I used to feel that way when I was doing perfectly with Eat to Live back in the day, but it was never sustainable long term. Now it's my default. This is not the same as discipline. Discipline is that white-knuckling your way past a craving that's screaming at you. What I'm talking about is a craving that never got loud enough in the first place because, as we talked about earlier, The underlying supply problem and the underlying restriction problem were both addressed. I'm not going to tell you that this shift is instant, and I want to be super honest about something else too. What looks like a clean 4-shift system actually took me years to build. I've been working through pieces of this since 2020, even before my cancer diagnosis. Just tried to figure out why nothing I'd ever been taught actually worked for the life that I was living. Why I couldn't stick to anything for more than a week. Why I was so turned off by salads for so long. Nobody handed me this method that I've created. I built it myself piece by piece. And the one thing that was never negotiable for me was that it had to be sustainable for the actual chaos of my life, not some calmer version of my life that I don't have. The protein piece alone took me about 6 months before it felt good instead of effortful. And I was always unwinding a lot of ex-vegan thinking at the same time, trying to find protein-forward meals that I actually loved instead of just choking down cottage cheese, which, by the way, still don't like. For a while, I was mostly living on protein bars because I genuinely didn't know how to build a real meal around animal-based proteins. And getting to where I am now, eating mostly whole foods, it took about 1.5 years. I had to relearn this whole thing. And I'm telling you that number so you don't have to find it the slow way that I did, not to scare you off, because by the time you're working with me, a lot of that guessing has already been gone. It's already figured out because I already did it and I have systematized and codified it to pass it on to my clients. For me personally, the craving shifts actually started within days of consistently hitting the protein goal number of 130 grams per day. Building all 4 shifts into a stable rhythm took far longer than a few months. These days with a client, I can usually get them to real relief within a few weeks, with weight loss potentially already moving in that time period, because I already did the slow, expensive work of figuring out what actually works so that my clients don't have to. I started seriously working with the protein piece of this in May of 2025, and it's now July 2026, and I usually don't hit my protein numbers perfectly every day either, and I don't think I need to anymore. I think my nervous system, my brain is really trusting me more. Food's coming, we're going to get our fuel with each day of basic consistency that passes. But I do aim to get at least 30 to 40 grams at each meal, and I usually land around 100 to 115 grams per day because my habits and preferred meals are in place now. And that's good enough to keep things quiet for good. Well, unless I have to go on prednisone again. Also, I'm the kind of person who cannot eat the same thing every day for more than a month, right? So I have to switch different meals up. But the protein part stays the same. And I'll be sharing my favorite meals that I've found as time goes on as well. But here's the thing that matters the most. More than any number on a food tracker, food stopped being a push for me. I'm not forcing myself through meals that I don't want anymore. I'm just eating things that I genuinely love, which makes it easy to keep doing it day after day. And I'm keeping a really close look on my numbers, my blood sugar, my blood pressure, my cholesterol, and making sure that what I'm doing is fitting my long-term goals for health as well. The old way of eating that I used to subscribe to, it always felt like a push against myself. Some moments were easy, but so many of them were hard. It just doesn't feel that way anymore. And that's the other thing I want you to hear, is that this isn't about perfect compliance. It's about consistency that's actually sustainable because you like it, which is the whole point. So if you've spent years assuming the problem was your willpower, I want to offer you a different starting point. Stop trying to solve a biological shortage with willpower and then calling yourself the problem when your willpower runs out. The shortage itself needs to be addressed first. It needs to be fed. The restriction itself needs to be unwound. Those two things together are what get you to quiet. And I've actually got room for one more private client right now. So if you want help figuring out exactly where your food noise is coming from, whether it's leaning more towards protein stuff or working on the restriction stuff or both, you can book a free 15-minute what I call two-step call with me at setpointscience.com/two-step. We're going to look at where you are right now and find 1 or 2 practical steps that you can take today, whether or not you ever join one of my coaching programs. Until next time, you are not broken because your brain has been loud around food. The path to quieting food noise is not discipline. It's finally feeding yourself enough. See you in the next episode.